Welcome to today's IELTS listening practice. In this session, you will hear a clear and analytical explanation of how former President Donald Trump's tariff policy influenced the global economy. Listen carefully for key details, as understanding these points will help you improve your listening comprehension and analytical skills for the IELTS exam. Let's get started. When Donald Trump took office as the 45th President of the United States in January 2017, he brought a very different approach to international trade. For many years, American leaders had supported free trade agreements, which aimed to reduce barriers between countries, promoting the smooth exchange of goods and services. However, Trump argued that these agreements had not worked in America's favor. He believed American factories had closed, jobs had disappeared, and the country's wealth had flowed overseas, especially to economic competitors like China. To address these concerns, the Trump administration introduced a series of tariffs. But what are tariffs? Simply put, tariffs are taxes that a government places on imported goods. By making foreign products more expensive, tariffs are meant to encourage consumers and businesses to buy more domestic products. Trump's strategy was to use tariffs both as a tool of economic policy and as a negotiating tactic. He aimed to protect American workers, particularly in industries such as steel, aluminum, and manufacturing, where jobs had declined over previous decades. The administration's first major tariffs targeted steel and aluminum imports in 2018. President Trump argued that cheap foreign steel and aluminum threatened America's national security, as well as the livelihoods of American workers. A few months later, the administration took further action, imposing tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. The justification was that China had engaged in unfair trade practices, including intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. By increasing the cost of Chinese goods in the United States, Trump hoped to pressure China to change its policies and level the playing field for American companies. The administration also aimed to reduce the United States' trade deficit, the gap between how much the country imports and how much it exports. At the time, the U.S. imported significantly more from China and other countries than it exported to them. Trump and his advisors saw tariffs as a way to encourage Americans to buy local products, thus reducing the trade gap and boosting the domestic economy. Initially, the introduction of tariffs appeared to benefit certain American companies, especially those in the steel and aluminum industries. With foreign competition effectively made more expensive, U.S. steelmakers could charge higher prices and increase production. Reports showed that jobs in these industries, which had been declining for years, experienced a temporary boost. Some factories that had closed down were reopened, and workers in these sectors saw signs of hope. However, the positive effects did not last long. Tariffs are a double-edged sword. While they can help producers in the targeted industries, they can hurt those who rely on imported materials or face retaliation from trading partners. For example, the car manufacturing industry in the United States depends heavily on imported steel and aluminum. When those materials became more expensive, the cost of making cars went up. Automakers found themselves squeezed between higher production costs and pressure to keep prices low for consumers. Farmers, too, felt the impact quickly. Many American farmers sell their crops and livestock abroad, particularly to China. In response to the U.S. tariffs, China imposed its own tariffs on American goods, especially agricultural products like soybeans, pork, and dairy. As a result, American farmers lost access to key markets, and prices for their goods dropped sharply. Many faced financial hardship, and the U.S. government had to provide billions of dollars in aid to support the agricultural sector. Other industries that rely on complex supply chains, such as electronics and machinery, also faced challenges. Many American companies buy parts and raw materials from around the world, assemble products in the United States, and then sell them both domestically and internationally. Tariffs increase the cost of imported parts, making it harder for these businesses to remain competitive. Some companies decided to delay investments, scale back production, or even move manufacturing overseas to avoid the higher costs. But how did these policies affect ordinary Americans? One of the key lessons from Trump's tariff policy is that the costs often fall on consumers. When tariffs make imports more expensive, businesses frequently pass those costs on to their customers. This means higher prices for everyday goods, from washing machines and refrigerators to electronics and clothing. Even food prices were affected. as tariffs on agricultural products disrupted supply chains and raised costs. Research studies estimated that the average American household paid several $100s more each year as a result of tariff-related price increases. While the intent was to protect American jobs, many consumers found themselves paying more for the same products. In some cases, companies tried to absorb the extra costs or find alternative suppliers, but these adjustments often took time and required significant investment. The effects of Trump's tariffs were not limited to the United States. The global economy is highly interconnected, with supply chains spanning multiple countries. When the world's largest economy changes its trade policies, the impact is felt worldwide. Many companies that previously manufactured goods in China began to look for alternatives, moving some production to countries like Vietnam, Thailand, or Mexico. However, shifting supply chains is a complex and costly process. Businesses had to find new suppliers, set up new factories, and navigate different regulations. These changes led to uncertainty, reduced investment, and disruptions to the flow of goods. The uncertainty created by ongoing trade tensions made companies hesitant to invest in new projects or expand their operations. Businesses worried that further tariffs or policy changes could affect their profitability. As a result, global investment slowed, and economic growth in many countries was negatively affected. Relations between the United States and China, the world's two largest economies, became increasingly strained. Trade talks took place throughout Trump's presidency, with both sides imposing and adjusting tariffs in response to each other's actions. Although a partial agreement, known as the Phase 1 deal, was reached in early 2020, trust between the two countries was badly damaged. The agreement included promises by China to buy more American agricultural products and some changes to intellectual property rules. But many tariffs remained in place. Other countries also responded to the U.S. tariffs with their own measures. Canada, Mexico, the European Union, and others imposed tariffs on American products, targeting industries such as agriculture, whiskey, and motorcycles. These retaliatory tariffs were designed to put political pressure on the Trump administration by hurting key sectors of the American economy. International organizations, such as the World Trade Organization, the WTO, criticized the U.S. approach. The WTO is supposed to mediate trade disputes and promote free trade, but it has limited power to enforce its rules when major countries choose to ignore them. The rise in protectionist policies and the weakening of global trade rules contributed to a sense of instability in the world economy. So what have we learned from the experience of Trump's tariffs? One key lesson is that tariffs are a blunt instrument. While they can help certain industries in the short term, they often have unintended side effects. When countries impose tariffs on each other, it can escalate into a trade war, with both sides suffering economic losses. Another important lesson is that consumers often bear the brunt of the costs. Higher prices for everyday goods can reduce purchasing power and hurt living standards. Businesses that rely on global supply chains may face higher costs and uncertainty, making it harder to plan for the future. Perhaps most importantly, the experience of the tariff war revealed how fragile the system of global trade really is. Decades of progress toward a more open and interconnected world economy can be disrupted by sudden policy changes. The resulting uncertainty can slow investment, reduce growth, and create tensions between countries. Despite the change in administration after the 2020 election, many of the tariffs introduced by President Trump remain in place as of today. Policymakers continue to debate the best way to balance national interests with the benefits of free trade. In summary, Trump's tariff policy had a significant impact on the global economy. It aimed to protect American jobs and industries, but led to higher prices for consumers, disrupted supply chains, and strained international relations. The experience has provided valuable lessons about the complexities of global trade and the importance of stable, predictable policies. Thank you for listening to this IELTS listening practice. To further develop your skills, try summarizing what you have learned from this audio or answering comprehension questions based on the information provided. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more IELTS listening content and practice.